We're in. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. Good to see you again. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. So, just as an aside, Dr. Brian is back in the studio. For anyone that wants to learn more about Dr. Brian after this podcast, we did a podcast together a couple months ago, number 44, to learn all about Dr. Brian and his early days as a doctor, and then also as a jujitsu fighter or competitor. But now today, I think we're just going to do the full jujitsu experience. So Brian, you recently won a tournament.
Yeah, a couple months ago, last time I was on here, I was preparing for what we call the International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation, IBJJF for short, because I'm going to probably refer to it um, throughout here. And it was in Las Vegas. It's called American Nationals. And so I was preparing for that, went out and competed both in my division and the open class division, which is any weight class in your belt and age bracket. So
Mhm.
yeah, so that went well. I was really happy. I brought my son with me. He was really been wanting to go, and so I brought him, and he actually really impressed me. He's 10 years old, but he was the one coaching me, and he calls out the clock. He calls out when someone's guard is open. That means that their legs are open, and so I can advance. And so it was actually a really great experience overall in terms of jujitsu and bonding with my son and just meeting great people again.
So this is amazing to me because, like, it's funny that you're a doctor, and then you also have all this, or you make all this time to practice jujitsu and compete in jujitsu, and then you won your age bracket for the entire United States.
Yes, I guess you can say that. On some level, I mean, it is a national tournament. Yes, that bracket and the open class bracket, so it was a really good, um, great experience. But I just make the time, and you'd be amazed. And one of the reasons I really love going out there competing is the various people that you meet there, and um, pharmacists, business owners, former um, military active and veterans, law enforcement, and just talking to some of these people. You don't really get to talk to them till maybe after the match, and you connect to social media, and like, wow, you do this, you travel, you are involved in these kind of things, and it's really impressive and amazing to see the gamut of people that actually engage and compete on that level.
You know, there's easier ways to meet people than choking them out, right?
Tell me, I'd like to know, but that is one way, and that is true. But there is a special bond because anyone that just trains in a martial art, especially jujitsu alone, there's already a special bond in the culture, and then when you go to that level of competing, it's just another level of connectivity because you know what it takes to get out there.
Mhm.
The nerves, the preparation, the mental preparation, and to win and to lose, and so there's that just already immediate bond with anyone there. That's why I think it really makes it a lot easier to connect with people.
Have you met any, like, bad losers who you've beaten and then they just don't wanna talk to you afterwards or don't wanna be friends or they're just done with you after that?
Well,
You
in
don't
my
you don't have to name names.
no, but in my age bracket, you don't see that very often.
Mm.
I don't know if you're gonna ask me my age bracket, but I'm up there, and with the age bracket, I'm what we call Master 5,
Mhm.
and so it goes all the way down to kids, teens, and Master 7, which is, I believe, 60 years and up or 65 years and up, and so, usually you get a lot of people there who are, just a different level of mindset, and so, no, I haven't experienced anyone on that level. Maybe sometimes on the younger generation, the adult level, because a lot of people there, they fly from all over the world, they invest a lot of their time, and this is what they do. This is for some people, they're living, they commit to it, and sometimes emotions can get high in that level, but luckily, one of the best things about for me is I'm best friends with you before, and I could be best friends with you after, but those 5 minutes together, we're not friends at that moment in time, but we're able to turn it back off, at least for myself right after, and I think that deals with the level of mindset, maturity level, for the people in my age bracket.
If I was on the mat with you, there's no way I could last 5 minutes. I'd be done in 30 like 5 seconds. You'd be like, "Action," or "Start," or whatever, and then I'd be done.
And that's what you build up,
Yeah.
that's what you build up, and maybe 5 minutes seems like a long time, but that's the whole aspect about it is you build up that stamina, that endurance, and that mental fortitude to last that 5 minutes, and so it's definitely a developmental thing,
Mhm.
that progresses over time.
It's nice though, because like when you watch jujitsu versus the other martial arts and stuff like that, like the thing I like about it, and I've never done it, um, but I've talked to a few people who do it, and you obviously are one of them. But it's there's like I like it because you don't hit your
Mhm.
opponent, right? Because when I see people hitting each other, I have to turn away. Like I can't watch boxing, I can't watch MMA. I just don't like watching anyone, men or women, just hit each other in the face.
Yeah.
Like that's just too much for me. But I really like jujitsu because it's all about like grabbing onto people, twisting them up, getting them off balance, getting them onto the ground, getting them on their back, getting them in all these kind of crazy positions. But you never have to just swing at someone. And I find that like so refreshing.
And I think that is, and I've done, competed growing up as a kid in a striking martial art and karate, uh, and so I've definitely, had that level of experience, and I think why a lot of people are attracted to jujitsu is because of that reason. Is no striking. We do train self-defense and basic striking moves and self-defense for blocking kicks and so forth, but nothing as part of the whole core of the martial art. The whole part of jujitsu in Japanese meaning the gentle art is a grappling martial art where you are the main strategy is to leverage
Mhm.
and to get the person on the ground and to either get away or to leverage and defeat that person on the ground. And so part of jujitsu is either you manage the distance by staying far or you close that distance, but you don't want to be in a striking range. And that's one of the things that's with jujitsu. And I think the reason why it's popular, especially with older people, is that very reason.
Mhm.
People don't wanna strike or get kicked or, anything like that, and, that's a real consideration, and so that's why I think personally in jujitsu, there's more longevity in people, whether it be their physical aspect is, and especially if you train in a gym that takes care of each other, we're not trying to rip out each other's arms. We'll tap, we'll take it easy, we'll be easier on the submission. But then there's certain classes and times where there's more competitive people
Mhm.
that, like for me on Saturdays, it's literally a competition class. And so not everyone there competes, but a lot of them do. And so the intensity is higher level than your other regular classes during the week, where you have people who just are doing recreationally. They're doing it for self-defense, they're doing it for health, and some competitors as well. But so that's the whole thing I like about it. Uh, and so,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, as a television guy, a longtime television guy, I basically the only thing I know about jujitsu is that Anthony Bourdain did it because I was a big fan of him, and he would actually include it in some of his TV shows and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he was ripped, and he was like 60 something, 62 or 63 at the time of his death. But he was doing jujitsu like as much as he could, as often as he could on every continent, like even when he was traveling. And yeah, when you think about the longevity of that kind of combat discipline, right? About the grabbing, the twisting, getting people down on the ground versus the striking. I mean, you can't take a punch at 60, I don't think. I mean, Mike Tyson might be able to or something like that, but the average
Yeah.
person, you don't want to be getting hit in the face at 60 or 65. But jujitsu does seem like if you keep your body limber and keep your body strong, it does
Mhm.
look like, a martial art that you can do, in your advanced years.
Yeah, yeah, and there's some considerations, right? And people can get injured, right? That's I'm not gonna say that people don't get injured. It all depends on your body and the level of engagement you're participating in. But a lot of people they have to go back to work, and going back to work with a broken nose, a bloody lip, or some type of facial damage is in where that is a potential risk at all the time, whether it be with boxing or some type of striking martial art, that's kind of a consideration as well. But, you can get, depending on how intense the sparring or roll goes. But for the most part, I personally have gone out unscathed most of the time.
So you're not coming back into work on Monday morning like, remember that movie Fight Club,
Yeah.
with
Brad
Brad Pitt
Pitt,
and, Edward Norton?
Edward Norton.
And Edward Norton was, like, going to these fights and then going to work the next day, and his eyes is black, and his nose is bloody, and there's blood on his shirt, and
Yeah.
he's all messed up. You ever go back to work looking like that at any time?
No, no, I would say the most sustained is my ears. My ears, are a little sensitive. Not everyone gets that. The whole little bit of the, cauliflower earish where you just because the way I fight is with my head. Okay. I'm pretty aggressive in terms of going in and using my head as a way to advance and leverage. And your ears are there, and some people get it, some people don't. And what happens is when you rub your ears a lot, you get inflammation there with fluid, and you have to drain it. And so sometimes people drain it, some people don't. But so that's probably it. But I haven't had any black eyes or anything like that. Luckily, no knee injuries. Maybe soreness, definitely. You definitely get soreness and bruises for sure.
Yeah, that's wild. No, that's such a good movie.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Just getting some flashbacks.
yeah.
It was brilliant. So let's go back a little and understand your we only touched on jujitsu a little bit kind of at the end of
Mhm.
our last conversation, but maybe today we can do a little bit more. So when did you get into this discipline and where did this desire come from? Like, did your dad do it or someone in your family introduce you to it? Like, let's go back to the very beginning and then we'll talk about your most recent win.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've been training. This coming July will be my 8 years. I've
Mhm.
been training, and so in my 40s, I started training, and it was just coincidental. My daughter, we wanted to put her into some activity, and my brother had told me that his son was training in jujitsu locally, and he said, "Hey, you should, get Chloe, my daughter, into it." And she was about 7 or 8, and so we did. So I brought her there and was watching them, and I said, "You know what? This is something I could probably do." And so I did, and the other reason was because she was gonna compete,
Mhm.
and so, she wanted me to compete with her,
Oh,
and I thought, "What a great opportunity to bond." And so I joined, and within 2 months, when I first told professor is what we call the black belt, teachers, is I said, "I wanna compete in the upcoming tournament coming up." He said, "That's 2 months away." And so I did. I took some private lessons, and for my first tournament, I actually, did pretty well. I was able to get 2nd place, had 3 matches and got 2nd place. And so but that was a great bonding moment with myself and my daughter, and so ever since then, I haven't looked back. And so that's kinda where it just started.
so from like, you didn't start doing jujitsu until your 40s. Like, so what were you doing before that? Like, how active were you in your younger years? What kinds of things were you doing in your younger years before you took up jujitsu? Like, I'm just trying to get the audience on board here. Like,
Oh,
where
okay.
were you, like, how fit were you before you started, like,
Got
to
it,
try to
got it.
do jujitsu? Like, were you running marathons or doing anything else kind of extraordinary?
Well, growing up, I grew up, in Ohio, and,
We can tell. It was nice shirt, by the way.
which is Oklahoma, though.
Oh, is it? It's OU's?
No,
I
don't
thought.
that's I'm not this is not Buckeye shirt. For your listeners out there, this is, Oklahoma University,
Okay.
the Sooner Nation.
Oh, what's Oklahoma? Is it or Ohio State is the big one, right?
Well, Ohio State is, the big school in
Right.
Ohio, the, Buckeyes, and there's Oklahoma State in Oklahoma, and I got my PhD from, Oklahoma University.
Okay.
And so,
People are gonna shit on me for getting that wrong. I'm sorry.
think we clarified that real quickly.
Yeah.
Um, so no, we grew up in Ohio, and Ohio is a big tennis place, and so I did martial arts first. We did soccer growing up. I have an older brother and a younger sister, so our parents really believed in sports. So soccer was the first sport we played in, played tournaments and so forth. Then my parents enrolled my brother and I into karate. We did that, competed for a little bit, and then we got into tennis, and really competition tennis, camps, private lessons, and tournaments.
Mhm.
And from there, moved out to California. And then in college, I played high school tennis throughout my 4 years of high school. The college I went to didn't have a tennis team. And so I just played a lot of intramural sports, joined a fraternity organization during college, and just got involved with a lot of sports like football, ultimate frisbee, and all kinds of those sports. And then graduate school happened, and so I was a career student for quite a while, throughout my 20s and early 30s, got my doctorate degree, and I was at that point, but I was always working out. I was at that era where just working out, getting big and huge, doesn't matter your cardio as long as you're big and huge. I grew up in that era of, of fitness.
It's
And
because we all grew up in the '80s watching, like, Schwarzenegger and
Hulk
Stallone.
Hogan, Stallone. Like I said, I remember vividly. I mean, I was doing it in college because I was pretty strong guy, probably walking around like 180, 185, and, but I was didn't wanna do cardio because I thought I'd lose weight. S So I was eating about 6 meals a day, tons of potatoes, protein drinks, which you know that you can overdo it. So, I was literally waking up at night just to eat a meal, and so that's how I was into that, and luckily and then, after I got my PhD, I was like, "Man, I gotta do something else," and that's where I got into jujitsu.
That's wild. So
Yeah.
when you were doing karate with your brother back in Ohio, um, how I mean, were you guys beating the shit out of each other too? Because like I think I took karate and taekwondo with my brother. There's a 3-year age gap between the two of us, and we were taking karate and taekwondo together for a few years, I think. And but we kept getting like we kept coming home and just killing each other. And my dad was like, "Fuck this!" Like karate and taekwondo is finished. Like, and then he's like, "Pick another sport." So we both ended up playing basketball. But I think when I was like 10 or 12, we were doing karate and taekwondo, and then it just got too violent at home. My dad was like, my mom and dad were like, "No, this is over."
We never did that, believe it or not. I grew up in the, WW World Wrestling era, and so if anything I was wrestling with my sister, and, my brother didn't want anything to do with that. My brother was 3 years older than me as well, but I remember when we had one belt promotion, um, that, they had my brother and I spar against each other, and immediately from the very beginning, he did a roundhouse kick to my gut, and I flew across the floor, and then they just stopped. That's it, that's enough, and we got our belts and moved on, but no, we never really sparred at home that I recall.
Mm,
Like I said, I was really into that whole wrestling era and Hulk Hogan, and that's where I would my dad and mom would get upset as I'm trying to do these moves and body slams on my little younger sister.
yeah, I can see that, yeah. But we did grow up in, like, the heyday of wrestling. Like, yeah, people think, like, wrestling is a big deal today, and it might be more valuable, and it might be a bigger business and stuff like that, but, like, the heyday of when it, like, really, like, swept across, like, grade school and those
Mhm.
and the middle school and stuff like that was, like I think that was really our era. Like, if you were 10 or 12 in the '80s and you didn't watch wrestling, like, you had no friends.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and you're right, actually, you're probably right on that level. It's out there still. I mean, my son got into it for a period of time, and we went to the Monday Night Raws, we went to a WrestleMania, and you'd be amazed of how culturally pervasive it is. People my age were really into it,
Mm,
and they were there. They had these belts that you can buy for like $500 or more, real legit leather belts, and they're really into it. And even one time, my son and I were walking in line, and there were these two adult men just kind of arguing or having this contentious argument about what's going to happen next, and they were really into this the narrative of it all, and people really, get into it. So, so definitely it's definitely had a lasting effect, and,
mm.
but it was a great bonding with my son as well.
Did you ever see The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke?
I have not, but I'd love to see that.
Well, I think he won an Oscar for it, didn't he?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
so. He, at least got nominated.
It was fucking dark. I just
Yeah.
remember that being like, because like, I was the same way. Like, you pick a wrestler, you follow them along. They have this narrative. It was like a soap opera back in the
Mhm.
day, right? And everything was shiny and bright, and everything was choreographed for the most part. And it was like a lot of fun. It was pure entertainment.
Yeah.
Like that was it, right? And then you watch the wrestler, and then you're like, oh my god, this guy is on death's bed.
Well, you watch some of the stunts today, and it is, I mean, it is, I would say, probably one of the more arduous and physically demanding sports out there. I mean, yes, it's whatever else, it's predetermined, but those stunts they're doing are legit and real. Getting slammed, getting hit, and you see all kinds of those injuries, and those are legit, real stunts that they're doing.
So it's amazing that in your youth, you played soccer, you played tennis. I mean, did you ever wanna take your tennis career, further? Because you played 4 years of tennis in high school. I mean, that's a huge commitment. Like, tennis is a serious, sport that requires a lot of practice, and, I mean, like, what was your idea, spending your entire high school career kinda playing tennis and then having to give it up?
Well, I'll be honest, tennis can be a burnout sport, especially if you're on an individual level. And then just moving out to California, from Ohio to California, there was just a lot more to do. I was actually supposed to, play for in high school.
Mhm.
I was recruited for high school to play tennis, in Ohio. My brother played for that same school. They were a very competitive school on the state level. And I moved here as a freshman, and there's just so much stuff to do in California. Kind of got a little burned out, and wasn't playing as much on that competitive level. But I and then you hear some of these people who I was competing against and at my level as a junior, how they advanced their careers on the collegiate level, but just wasn't my path. It's just, I just found other activities to get engaged in, but, and then plus the college I went to did not have a tennis team, but I think I would have played on the collegiate level, had that opportunity, presented itself.
Yeah. Because it's, I mean, going from tennis to jujitsu is a bit of a stretch, right? Like, I don't think it's not a transition most people make. So I had to ask you about it.
Well, hey, one of my 2025 goals is I plan to compete again in tennis.
Oh, really?
Yes, I plan to do that. So that is my goal. Actually, one of my goals is when I receive my black belt in jujitsu, that's when I'm going to start competing again in tennis. So I'm giving myself about 2 years to get back in shape and to compete on the tennis level.
And do you have a jujitsu black belt yet?
No, I just got promoted to brown belt,
Hmm.
and it takes a couple of years, 2, 3, or whenever they decide I'm fit for it to receive my black belt.
But you're already the champion of the United States in your age category. Don't you get the black belt automatically?
No, but on the adult level, for your listeners who aren't aware, adult level meaning 18 to 29 years of age, and then you put them on master's level from 30 to 35, and it goes up.
Hmm.
So you could do the calculations about me on master 5, and
We're
so
the same age. It's all good.
so you do a master 5.
I would be if I could do anything. Yeah.
But in that when you win a major world title, we're talking about a world title, you are no longer allowed to compete in that same tournament again at that same belt. And so that's why you see some of these people, because usually the average time span to get a black belt in jujitsu is about 8+ years. That is it. And that's another part of, to me, why I like jujitsu, is because you really earn that belt, and you can't get it under 18 years of age either.
Hmm.
And so, however, there's been people who've progressed within like 5 years or shorter, like BJ Penn. If you're familiar who BJ Penn was, one of the legends of the mixed martial arts and the UFC. He was winning on a world level, and so, like I said, once you win on that world level, you get promoted to that next belt if you want to continue to compete. And so there's people that can get it in 4 to 5 years, but it's rare.
So you can't just stay in the same level beating the shit out of people and taking the prize money?
At that level, no. But in the master levels, yeah, you can win all you want at that division.
That's interesting. So I had David Camarillo on the podcast a couple months ago, and he's great. So he was a Taekwondo champion, and then ended up setting up a clinic, and he was like going back and forth to Japan, and he trained in Japan all the time, and now he trains MMA fighters and also trains a few celebrities here and there and stuff like that. And he was down here, and he was just telling me like how grueling it was, because he was like a young, like Taekwondo champion at, before he was 10 years old. And then he just rode this wave of being in martial arts his entire life now, to the point. And he was actually one of the like stunt coordinators for the John Wick film, the most recent
Oh,
one,
wow.
which was wild. But he was just telling stories about all these injuries and stuff he gets in Taekwondo. And then, I get to hear you about how like these guys who are like 60, who are still competing in jujitsu and still, grappling and going to Vegas to do these tournaments. And it's just like, there's so many other martial arts that you just can't do in your 40s and 50s, just because there's too much wear and tear.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
You're right. You're right. And then actually in my school, there's a professor there. He's 70+ years old. He used to be a power lifter in his younger heydays, and he trains religiously. He's a black belt, and at 70+ years of age is probably right 72, 73 now. And yeah, so that's just a huge testament
Hmm.
of the longevity of it. As long as you take care of your body, be smart about it, you can last a lifetime. You see some real older people engaging in and even competing,
Hmm.
right? And at 65+ years of age.
Because jujitsu is not so much about power, like hitting someone or kicking someone, because it's more about, holding on to someone and getting them off balance and things like that, or putting them at a disadvantage. If you were to fight that the professor at your school who's 70 with a black belt, like, would he take you down right away, or would it be a match? Like, I mean, because you're almost you'd probably be like 30 years younger than him. Like, what would that look like
Well,
to a complete fucking novice like me who doesn't know anything?
no, I've sparred and trained with professor. His name's Professor Steve Summerman, by the way, and so I've trained with him, and he's tough. He's tough, and definitely has great defense and so forth. And what happens in jujitsu as well, though, if you get two people who are somewhat equal in their skill level, a bigger size and strength will be a huge advantage. And that's where jujitsu comes, though. If you have someone who is smaller but fluid in jujitsu, which a much bigger untrained person, that person is going to have a great, great experience, or at least a leverage or advantage over the bigger person who doesn't train. But when you get people who are both trained and skill set, the athleticism, the strength, and size will definitely make a difference. That is a separating factor.
Yeah.
And, but I'm telling you, I was, on another podcast, and what I was telling people are some of the most dangerous or scary people on the mats are these 15 to 16-year-old blue belts.
Oh, really?
Because yes, because you can't get a blue belt, until you are about 15 or 16 years of age, but you know that they've been training for 5, 8, maybe 12 years prior to that, 'cause, most academies, you can start usually around 3 to 4 years of age, and many of those kids, by that time, when they're 15 and 16 years old, they've been training, and they're flexible, strong, fast, and very technical, and so when you you see a 15, 16-year-old even against a huge person, there's a great chance, they're gonna catch you.
I mean, who's putting 5-year-old kids into jujitsu training?
A lot.
Really?
Well, yeah, that's the great thing about it too. At 3 years, 4 years of age, and of course, they are teaching them the basic fundamentals, they keep it fun, but no, it's great for self-esteem, self-defense, and there was actually research that they did on boys that struggled with ADHD, and their ADHD symptoms, if they're trained 2 to 3 times a week, their ADHD symptoms of inattentiveness, impulse control dramatically decrease versus kids who didn't train in jujitsu is because of the level of concentrations that's required. Um,
And they're exhausted.
and they're exhausted, yeah, yeah, and also you get other kids on the autism spectrum that a lot of parents do it. Most of the reasons, of course, I think that I see is bullying, self-esteem. My son or daughter's getting bullied, self-esteem, self-defense, but sometimes there's certain conditions, ADHD, autism, behavioral issues that have really, helped transform. I know literally of a kid who was known to be a bully at his elementary school who took up jujitsu, and from what I gather, he is no longer bullying. I mean, he was literally getting in trouble on a daily basis for physically and verbally bullying kids, and so I think it really humbled him and taught him something, and so there's a lot of great benefits, and not just jujitsu, a lot of martial arts. A lot of martial arts, that's why there's a discipline, there's a deference for authority, there's structure to it. I can speak mostly for, jujitsu on that level.
Mhm. It is fascinating. So, I mean, what's your daughter's experience been like? Because I said, like, because 8 years ago when you started this journey, you did it kind of for her so that you guys could have to do something together. Is she still training? Is she still competing?
Well, I'm glad you asked because, well, yes, she was competing for a little bit, and then COVID happened, that impacted, and then high school happened for her, and so she kind of her priorities shifted. And just recently, literally, this past Thursday was her first time again to but join us in the adult class. That was one of my dreams is for because my wife trains as well, and so does my son.
Oh
So
my
all
God, you
4
guys
of
are
us,
beasts.
we all train, and one of my biggest dreams is for all 4 of us to be on a mat together. Obviously, my 10-year-old can't join the adult class, but, maybe when he's 12, 13, and bigger, he can join us, but she joined and she, paired up with my wife, and so, yeah, she's getting back into it, and, yeah, I'm glad to see her back into it because this is something that you could take with you for life.
Yeah, I mean, when did your wife start?
She started about I would say about over 2 years ago.
Mhm.
about 2 years ago, and she was very hesitant, when she would watch our kids and just the awkward positions to her, someone sitting on you, someone grabbing you from behind.
Yeah, that doesn't sound good at all to me.
And also, speaking of that too for, women as well, especially women who've, um, had some unfortunate circumstances of maybe physical trauma.
Mhm.
It's you hear a lot of them talk about how it's really helped them get in touch with their body again, to get over those discomforts and to gain a level of confidence. Enough military veterans too is you hear a lot of them. I meet a lot of active and military veterans is because after their deployment and in active duty, they were looking for a culture that can somewhat replicate that level of camaraderie and intensity. And they always, a lot of them come back to saying jujitsu is the thing that can really replicate that.
It's really important actually, because like, I can remember so I played Division I basketball, and I wasn't good enough to play professionally, and then I I gave up the sport for years, and the thing that I missed the most was the discipline and the camaraderie because it's exciting to train your body to an elite level and then be surrounded by, you know, 10 or 15 other people that are also doing the same thing, working out just as hard as you. And, you build this bond and this kind of camaraderie, and it becomes like a religion. And then when that's gone, like that, I mean, I understand a little bit of the mentality when like military veterans, when they become a veteran, when they leave the military, and they feel that hopelessness and
Yeah.
that loss of it, and then for them to go in and find martial arts and find, a club and a professor and a team and people around that are all kind of in that same mindset, that's got to be just completely life saving on every level.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, one of my good friends now was active duty, several tours, I think over 5 tours. And he said, "Yeah, man, in the inner war that he deals with every single day in jujitsu is what saved him." And so, and speaking of that too, there's quite a few veterans who have sustained major injuries. I mean, one leg or double amputations. And again, it's a sport of martial art that you can still engage and be effective. The reality is, if you're missing 2 legs, kickboxing is not gonna um, can't get that really full experience.
Do they have like a special division for amputees?
No. Well, I don't know much about it, but I have seen special tournaments, like, especially for blind, but, I've seen in the real level, people being walked out with a guide who are completely blind. The difference, though, is when they start, they have to start with grips, because that'd be pretty dangerous if you don't start with a grip, so
Right.
that's the only thing, but they're competing on high level people, and there's some really talented people because their senses are solely highly acute. They're sensitive to movement, breath, but no, there are people who compete with 1 leg.
Is this like a blind person competing with another blind person, or
No,
is this a blind person with someone who can see?
someone who can see.
That's fucking crazy. How does that work?
Well, that's what I'm saying, that's why they start with grips.
Yeah.
But there no, I mean, you'd be amazed of how talented they are because of all the other senses that they need to engage in.
Mhm.
They can feel and sense, and, but yeah, you get people, like I said, with 1 leg. One of the professors, he has a condition on both his hands, and man, he chokes me. He can get me well, and, because they adapt to that, and so, like I said, it'd be very hard for other certain sports to be able to, not to say they can't, but that's again why jujitsu is beneficial, is you can work around some of those challenges.
Yeah. So your wife just picked this up 2 years ago, and I guess you were in year 6 of competing, and 2 years ago, your wife was like, "I'm gonna give this a try too." Like, what was that conversation like?
I was really happy for one is
Was she doing anything else, like, physically active? Like, was she engaged in any other sports at a high
no,
level or anything like that?
no, not at all. She doesn't enjoy going to the gym. She did some kickboxing, which she enjoyed, back in her college days, but she wasn't really doing anything, and one day she decided to try it, and, we did, and, she would partner with me. That was one of the criteria that she wanted, was she wants me to be her partner, and so now, from not wanting to do it to hesitance, she got a little frustrated at first because she felt like she wasn't developing, and that's the whole thing too with it too, is that it humbles you very quickly, and it was, that's why you get a lot of people who are attracted to it, whether it be the Elon Musks, whether it be the Mark Zuckerbergs and so forth, because of the intellect that it requires,
Mhm.
and it's a chess game. And so she was getting frustrated. She was getting very frustrated that she wasn't developing as quickly, and so she
And you were partnering with her at this time? Like, were you just throwing your wife down on the mat? Like,
no.
were you sparring with her, or did she spar with another woman?
Well, you train, and at least in our school, you do some moves, demonstration moves, and then you do what we call specific training, where it's that move, but then there's some intensity, some resistance towards it. And then afterward, you can spar, which you start from a full standing up position or what have you, where you decide to with your person that's more intensive.
Mm.
But yeah, no, at first, I was being as gentle as I could when we first started, and things would happen, like, all of a sudden, she would get her nail caught in my gi, and then her nail would break off, and one time, as gentle as I could, I was just trying to push her knee so I could make some room to escape, and then her hip pops, and so she literally crawled off the mat, and she was upset, and so but now I kid you not that the level of intensity and resistance that I have to put up is a lot. It's probably like 30% or more than when we first started.
Mhm.
And you could just see her development. She's good at getting chokes. Her big thing is taking your back or mounting you. And and just that's what's amazing is that development you see in people. And coach kids as well, help out coaching kids and just see their development go over time is pretty amazing.
Yeah. Do you wish you started jujitsu, like, younger? Like, you came to it quite late in your life?
That's one of the things, at least with my clients, because whenever someone makes a big change in their life, a new diet, a new sport, or a new perspective, or what have you, people sometimes have regret. And I say, well, the two best times to start was back then when you wanted to, and then today. And so it helps me. I don't know. I mean, I'm a big believer that things happen in my life for a reason, and it wasn't meant to happen back then. Honestly, how competitive I am, probably some higher power is saying no, because I would have competed on that level, the adult level, and who knows, how my body would have taken that back then. And so, because, I'm pretty competitive and
But you were younger and the competition was younger?
younger, competition was younger. And plus, but that age range, that's when it started getting popular. And so I was still in that kind of college day year when it just started getting popular. So I think it was the right time for me. I mean, a little bit earlier, maybe a few years, but I don't I don't fantasize about, God, I should have done this in high school or college.
Mhm. That would have been an interesting journey because you would have peaked probably in your late 20s or early 30s instead of peaking in your, where we both are now in our mid 40s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but it's yeah, it's hard to say.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I think, I mean, it's great that you came into this, through family and then have brought the rest of your family on board for the journey as well, which I think is fantastic. And it's great that your daughter now is kind of coming back to it on her own terms.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things. Like before, I was watching my daughter. You would hear all these other people talk like, "Yeah, man, you just got to do it." And you just like anything else, you can't embrace it until you really do it. And so, sometimes there's people like, "Yeah, I don't wanna do it. I don't wanna get injured," or, "Man, I wanna get arthritis," or whatever like that, or it's just too intense. And and it's until you really try it and get into it, that you can't really embrace what it's really like, just like anything,
Mhm.
but truly for that one, you just truly can't embrace it, until you really, really give it a try, and it is addicting. It is addicting, um, and it's widely growing now. I mean, um, I think it's growing even in a faster pace, these days, because it's being involved with the UFC now. They're implementing that, and it's just getting bigger in popularity.
Isn't it is jujitsu an expensive sport to learn how to do? Because obviously, like, golf is really expensive. You gotta buy clubs, you have to, be a member at a club or have access to a club at some place. Like, tennis is quite expensive because you need to, rent courts and have equipment. Basketball and soccer are pretty cheap, you just need a ball. But what are martial arts like, just for people out there that don't really understand it? I don't remember how much, things cost for me, but, like, for your kids, like, getting them involved in jujitsu versus another sport? Like, is it an expensive thing to venture into?
It can really vary. It really varies on the school, the academy. Depends on what level, right? Just like in tennis, if you're in a competitive level and you really want to advance there, there's private lessons and so forth. And but if you want a recreational level, you can find a local court, just like any other sport
Mhm.
as well. Football, right? If you go into summer camps, that can get expensive as well. Jiu-jitsu on the same level, I think, depending on the school. I would say it's on the more moderate level, right? There's probably a monthly a fee for that, and then there's the equipment. The equipment can last for a while, the gi and so forth. And so I would say it's more on the more moderate level. Like I said, depending on the school. Some schools are more expensive than others, but I do think it's the one sport that you don't need a lot of money to be fluid in it. I mean, you get a lot of people in other countries who, third world countries that are some of the best fighters in the world, and whether it be from Brazil, Thailand, or any of these other countries that it doesn't take much to do, and you need, a mat, and that's probably about it.
Mhm.
Now, the level of instruction, I mean, you can get a lot of level of instruction too on instructionals and videos, but I don't think cost is a huge obstacle for becoming very good in jujitsu.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's so, because I mean, parents have to take all this kind of stuff into consideration,
Mhm.
right? When they're signing their kids up, for basketball leagues or whatever, right? Like, sometimes the cost can be really prohibitive. So that's nice to know because you just wear a gi and you're in bare feet, right? So
It's their feet until when you get on the mat,
yeah.
at least, and, yeah, that's pretty much it for me. It's a little bit because, competing in tournaments isn't the cheapest thing, and flying out to Vegas or other places, and some people are really extensive. They travel around the world to compete. Some people do it on their jobs. I have a buddy who works for a, hotel industry, and he gets flies, and he just trains at other places and competes if there's a tournament there. So, but I definitely don't represent probably your typical average middle-aged person in jujitsu,
Sure.
because I competed 10 times last year, and that was actually a Christmas gift for my wife because we have agreed on 6 tournaments a year,
Okay.
and so she said, "Hey, if you wanna compete 10 times this year." So I did. I competed 10 times, took advantage of it, and so I'm back to 6 for this year.
What's the difference between competing 6 times and competing 10 times?
Well, I mean, 10 times is almost once a month, if you break it down a little bit. I think it's will cost, number 1, depending on what tournament, but the level of intensity, of your training. I'm just one of those people, and that level of motivation, I can't train intensely for something unless I'm doing it for a reason, and tournaments are a great reason because, jujitsu can be pretty intensive, and if I don't have a beacon in the water or like a competition on hand, I might not train as intensively. That's just me,
Mhm.
whether it be with tennis, whether it be with even working out. There's gotta be something that I'm striving for. That's just the way I'm built and my mind is,
Yeah, it
and
can't be
it's
it can't be all stick, right? You need to have a carrot somewhere.
yeah,
Yeah.
and sometimes those competitions are a great affirmation of your hard work.
Mhm.
It really is, and if it's the process that's most important, not the gold medal, although that's a nice icing on the cake, but it is that process that it takes to get there, the intensity in the gym, the hours, the dieting, and, when I first started, the reason why we agreed to 6 is, when you're a lower belt, you get all intense in, like, the week or 2, I'm just in a zone. I'm in a zone, and then afterwards, you're exhausted, and so, but as I get a higher belt, I kinda go in more casually. I train outside, but you can go more casually, separate the training from the home life, and so I think I've matured on that level, and so I think that's why she's been was a little bit more flexible. Sort of it's
What's the recovery time like after a tournament? Like, whether you win or lose, I mean, your body must be just like, not like MMA fighters, like, who are getting kicked or in the face and stuff like that, but with that kind of intensity level, if you're doing 3 or 4 competitions in a day or over a weekend, I mean, you've gotta be pretty physically, mentally depleted after a tournament, right?
You do, but see, the thing is, the other good thing about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is every time you train, you can go at high intensity. You can. When you're sparring, you can go at high intensity levels. You can't do that in other martial arts. You can go at high intensity with a striking martial art. You can go all out because of the damage you're gonna sustain.
Mhm.
But Jiu-Jitsu is one of those, sports or martial art activities that you can go high level intensity and still, and then of course your body gets used to recover. I personally like to take, I usually take a week off just to mentally decompress and physically. But some people they train right after. And so the thing is, too, is the great thing about that is you're training for that level of intensity to begin with. You have the opportunity to train at that level. So the tournament is just different on some levels, but very similar on many levels, the level of intensity, depending on how you train. And so there's some people that they do a tournament and they're training the next day. I just personally like to take a week off um, for myself just to recover. And I do believe as you get older, your body needs a little bit more recovery time.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you're a doctor.
I have a PhD,
Yeah.
psychologist.
Right, and you have patients,
Yep.
and you have a practice.
Yes.
So how often are you training a week, and how are you making all this happen? Like, and also competing at the highest levels in your age bracket?
Well, great thing is I'm fortunate because I do work from home.
Mhm.
100% of the work I see clients across California, and so I work from home 100%. My school is literally down the street, probably about less than 5 minutes from me.
Oh, so you figured out the logistics of it.
The logistics of it, and so I train about 4 times a week,
Mhm.
especially when there's a tournament. 4 times a week is as much as I can do, and sometimes, like when there's not a tournament, probably go down to 3 times a week. But with my wife training on Sundays, Sundays was usually my day off, but that's the days that she likes to go. So I train pretty hard on Saturday and go back to Sunday. And now my daughter is going into it. So I'm probably going to be up to 4 times a week because I want to be there with them as well to support them.
And is this, like, in the evening?
It's the evening
Yeah.
for me. Well, most of my classes are at 6 o'clock at night. And my wife and I, we train at 9 in the morning on Sundays. And then I train at 11 o'clock on Saturdays. So I guess it's kind of even.
Mhm. Yeah, that's not bad. When you train at night, do you find it, like, hard to, rest afterwards, or do you have difficulty sleeping in the evenings?
I have no problem. It's just one of my things. I think it's genetic, and I have no problem sleeping. That's for sure. But I get pretty exhausted. You get exhausted, but what happens is right afterwards, you have this huge adrenaline rush. And so, like on Saturdays, the competition class, when I come home, I'm just so active, and all of a sudden, I just start to crash. So all I'm doing is eating all day, and just I start to wind down a couple hours after. But that energy surge is still going for like an hour or two right after you train that intensely.
I always had difficulties in college because, like, we would train, from 6 to 8 or 7 to 9 and sometimes 8 to 10. We had basketball practices and stuff like that, and after practice, I was so, like, amped up and so pumped up
Yeah.
that, when you finish practice, you gotta eat right away that's the number one thing. So now you're eating at, like, 8, 9,
Yeah.
10:30 at night, and then you gotta shower and clean yourself up, and then you gotta study. And I had a lot of difficulty, like, I couldn't get to bed before midnight. It was like I was up at, like, 1 or 2 a.m. sometimes because the adrenaline of, we would weight train, and then we would do a 2 to 3 hour practice, and then coming off of that, we would have to eat and then study and stuff like that. And I ended up on this, like, really crazy schedule. So I'm just curious, like, what does a 1 or 2 hour training session look like, on the back end of that, like, when you actually have to go home and decompress and eat a meal and deal with kids and then get to bed at a regular hour because you've got patients at 9 a.m.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of similar to that is that you do get that adrenaline rush. Um, and then you just eat, got to replenish a little bit. And sometimes I do a lot of work, but there's a difference in, I think, the adrenaline rush when I train on Saturday and Sunday in the mornings versus at night for some reason. The adrenaline rush isn't as much when I train at night. It's because you're winding down a little bit,
Mhm.
a little bit anyway, and so I just eat and maybe do some work and spend time with my kids, but it's during the, morning times where you just have the I think it's just because you just started your day, so to speak, and that adrenaline rush is there, but the Saturdays ones, which is a really intensive class, I start to my battery life starts to wane down. So, my wife, she says to me, "You're kinda, like, done on Saturdays." Hopefully I can change that this year and be a little bit more active and do some productive stuff after.
So 8 years ago, your daughter takes you to her first class, and you're watching her train and everyone else train, and you're like, I think I can do this, right? How long from that moment did you decide, like, oh yeah, I wanted to do this competitively and, like, enter tournaments and try to win them? Because that's a huge shift, right? Like, am I going to do this recreationally and it's going to be like a father-daughter time, or do I want to like win?
Well, you remember, it was my first 2 months of training
Yeah.
that I competed.
But what was that like? How did you get the confidence after 2 months of learning a brand new sport that you've never played before to be like, yeah, yeah, I'll get into that tournament right away?
You know, there were nerves, of course, because you don't know what to expect.
Right. Most people like train for years before they go into their first tournament.
And that's the competitive part of me,
Yeah.
I guess. That's the competitive part of me, and, I know I've been, on some level athletic all my life, and so I felt like maybe that might lend itself well, to it, and so I think it has. I think, um, so where I believe I'm attaining the benefits of having been involved in sports and working out a lot is paying off at this stage of life.
Mhm.
And so it really does. It does matter. You see a lot more. I believe jujitsu generally is evolving and changing. It used to be promoted as something where, like I said, the smaller, weaker person can defeat someone. But you're seeing a lot more people weightlifting and doing a lot of hardcore exercises to train for it. And so you're getting a more and more complete athlete now. And some of these kids that are training with weights and all kinds of different plyometrics or CrossFit exercises. Yeah, so they're becoming a lot more of a well-rounded athlete.
So if you're like 16 or 17 years old and you're one of these blue belt kids that have been training since they were 5 or whatever, and you're, top of your game, are there like university teams like for jujitsu? Like, can you get a scholarship to like go to a university to do jujitsu? Do you even know if that's a thing?
Not yet. They've been talking about making it on the Olympic level. But I think regulations and I would love to see that because like I mentioned earlier, it's the one sport where anyone in any world, depending on doesn't matter on their socioeconomic status, can compete. Right? I know that's not typical for some sports like skiing, not that's an expensive sport.
Yeah, yeah.
Not everyone, as well as like bobsledding and or even ice skating. That's an expensive sport. So but I would love to see jujitsu. I mean, they have boxing and karate, and I don't see why they can't have jujitsu. But I think the issue is having a unified set of rules to be able to do that. But I'd love to see it on that level. But no, there's no scholarships now. But there are some schools and academies that are promoting their kids and scholarshiping their kids to compete and so forth. So I think we may see that on some level, but it's from what I gathered, there's nothing on that level where a university, because it's not a university sport per se, but never know.
Yeah, that would be the future, right? I was just thinking, like, how do these kids make a living? How do these kids kind of because, like, if you go into if you go into the NCAA, now they have the NIL where
Yeah.
kids can make money as students. Obviously not as much as the football players or the basketball players because the audience is probably much smaller for jujitsu. But at least it would give them, a chance to maybe get a scholarship, get an education for free, and then make a little money.
Well, yeah, and we got wrestling. I mean, wrestling to me is and by the way, you get a lot of people who have a lot of lineage with wrestling transition to jiu-jitsu that don't pursue wrestling because I do believe wrestling is one of those sports where you can't do at at that intense level at 50, 60, and 70. It is it's probably one of the most, if not the most intensive and arduous sports out there. But you get a lot of people transition, and so you got wrestling out there, so I don't see why jujitsu couldn't get on there on that grander scale, especially how popular it's getting, so
So, without putting you on the spot, who is the U.S. Jiu-Jitsu champion who competed in the Olympics? Do you know who that person is?
but they don't have Olympics.
I thought Jiu-Jitsu was an Olympic sport.
No, that they're trying to.
What Taekwondo,
Yeah,
karate,
that's what I'm saying.
that makes no
Yeah, I
sense.
know, that's what I'm saying, and that's what I'm saying is that's why it would be such a powerful Olympic sport, especially with the rising popularity, but anyone can compete, doesn't matter their socioeconomic status and so forth is because you can be extremely good and there's not that separation. Like I said, those earlier sports where you need those resources to be really fluid in those sports.
I did not know that.
No.
So you're telling me like they have breakdancing in the fucking Olympics, but
Yeah,
they don't have Jiu-Jitsu?
exactly.
That's
And like
ridiculous.
I said, I think what I'm gathering is there isn't a universal set of regulations, but to be honest with you, I don't know how hard that is to do. We have, the biggest federation out there is the International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation, and it's they could adopt those or modify those, but you can't argue that it's injury, right? Because there's boxing, there's wrestling.
Oh, the wrestling stuff is terrible. Do you ever I mean, I live my life through film and television, so the only way I know how bad wrestling is I watched that Foxcatcher movie with Mark Ruffalo and Channing Tatum,
Okay.
and that was dark too, but those guys were really throwing each other around, like, it's pretty violent.
Yeah.
And I mean, Jujitsu can be equally aggressive as well, but the fact that wrestling's in the Olympics and Jujitsu is not makes no sense to me.
Yeah. Well, even judo can be a very tough sport as well, but yeah, I mean, and karates, some of those karates, they get knocked out and so forth, so I'd love to see jujitsu. I think that would be a very unifying sport for the Olympics.
Yeah, that'd be exciting, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so 2 months into your jiu-jitsu journey, 8 years ago, you decided to do your first competition, you finished 2nd. So you're feeling like you got a chance at this, right? You're like, "Okay, I'm doing all right here." So tell me about this progression from that first tournament to then doing the national level tournament in Las Vegas. Like, how do you build yourself up to that? Where do the other tournaments you go to, and how well did you do at those other tournaments to then be able to qualify for the Vegas one, which was the national championship?
Yeah, well, you don't qualify, per se, in the adult level and the black belt level, because there's so many, you have to have a certain number of points to compete on there, but on the master's level and so forth, you don't there's not usually a qualification, you literally sign up, because there's not as many people signing up for it. I think if
But sorry to interrupt you. That's really scary because you might get someone who's completely not ready to compete at that level, just paying and signing up, and then you're here, you know, you're training all the time, you're super fit, you're ready to go, and then on the other side of the mat is someone who's completely not ready, and that could be really dangerous.
Yes and no, but the assumption is that the belt that they're at, their level, is that they have the level of competence, to be at that level,
That's right,
right?
the belts. I forgot about the
Yeah,
belts.
so that those yeah, there are belts. So, like,
Fuck, I forgot about the belts.
where I think it's gonna be tricky, and when I do plan to compete on the black belt level, that's where it gets a little tricky, is because you can literally be a new black belt and someone who's been a black belt for 20 years, especially at my age bracket,
Mhm.
and have high level competition, because so this level of separation of skill level and experience is hugely can be hugely discrepant at the black belt level. On a purple belt level, for example, most people, if they're training consistently, they'll be a purple belt for 2, 3 years.
Mhm.
They're training consistently. But a black belt level, like I said, you can get one person who's been training for a very long time, a lot of experience. So that's where it can get a little tricky. So, but yeah, no, I mean, my first tournament, it was interesting. I fought three guys from the same school.
Oh, really?
And so I beat the first guy, beat the second guy, the third guy, I was completely exhausted. My head was literally spinning. Because one thing that you adapt to over time is you are moving in the adrenaline. I think I was dehydrated, number one, but my head was literally spinning in that last fight. And I lasted, but I got, the guy beat me.
And that's at 3 fights in 1 day.
3 fights in one day with probably about 5 to 10 minutes break in between.
That's
I
ridiculous.
know, I know. And
That's impossible. You're setting up that's how can you recover properly in
yeah.
10 minutes?
At the second match, I was done already. I was depleted, I was done, and that third match, I really didn't have much in me anymore, and so, but then, yeah, like I said, the room was literally spinning, but after that, I just kept signing up. Actually, that next year, or that same year, I, signed up for a big world tournament at the white belt level. And so yeah, that's where the assumption is that those people in those division are at a competency level, to compete at that level.
Mhm. And are you just gonna, like, spend another couple years getting your black belt and then just retire, put the black belt in a frame on the wall, and then just start playing tennis again?
No, I plan to still compete in jujitsu, but I also am hungry again to compete on the tennis level as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Tennis is a really social sport, like, because you can play singles, you can play doubles, you're on a bit of a circuit. Like, I've
mhm,
talked to quite a few people who have played tennis previously on the podcast or who run some organizations at a national
mhm.
level. And I think for older people who play, who are super fit and, who have done a lot of things in their past, playing tennis in your 40s and 50s is becoming, I think, a really popular thing. And there's a whole circuit, and there's tennis,
Yep.
and there's all these like posh country clubs throughout the Caribbean and in Central America, and people are just going around avoiding the winter and just playing tennis all the time. It sounds like a really nice way to like semi-retire.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you remind me of something too. One of the reasons why also I kind of strayed away from tennis during those days is because I was into just weightlifting. And getting big, and you cannot be that big and play tennis fluidly.
Yeah.
So I was more focused on that. The reason why I wanted to get back into tennis, because ever since I trained jiu-jitsu, I trimmed up really well. And I believe the athleticism and flexibility and agility that I got from jujitsu, I think will lend itself well on the tennis courts.
You just got to worry about the knees and the ankles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's true.
That's my big thing. Like, I've gotten so fit now. I'm probably as fit now as I have been in a long time. And I used to play basketball. So one of my friends was like, "Oh yeah, come out. We got a game. There's gonna be 9 of us. We need a 10th. 5-on-5, and come down and play with us." And I was just like, "No." Like, I mean, I love shooting and I love playing, but like this whole idea of like taking like my mid 40s body, and my mid 40s knees and ankles, like I can still climb mountains and walk across
Yeah,
deserts. That's fine. But like playing 5-on-5 for an hour or two, like you're gonna the ACL is gonna go, like something's gonna happen, and then you're rehabbing for 6 months.
yeah,
It's a nightmare, right?
yeah,
And that's always been my fear getting older, is like, because I might be a little bit like you, where I can go into a gym and shoot by myself for an hour, get a really good sweat, love it, miss the game, love the game. But then when I'm 5-on-5, I go crazy because I want to win.
yeah, yeah,
And then my body might not be able to do
yeah,
what I need it, what I think I can do. And then that's where you get into difficulty.
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if you have the same problem.
Well, it can be, yeah. You have to that's part of that self-regulation and understanding yourself, listening to your body, not
Self-regulation, yeah.
yeah, not let the ego take over.
Ego, right? Yeah. It's tough, man.
Can be,
Yeah.
but that's one of the joys of life is one of the things you can navigate through.
Yeah. So because you won Masters 5 at your current belt, which is blue or one below black,
I'm
right?
brown now.
You're brown now. So because you won this Masters 5 in brown belt, next year you're not allowed to compete in Masters 5.
No. So number 1, that tournament I won was in purple.
Oh,
And so I got my brown belt. So just for your listeners out there, for jujitsu, it goes white for adults, white, blue, purple, brown, black.
mhm.
And so that's the progression. So I got my brown about 2 weeks ago. And so, but again, only on the world big tournament level for the adults. That's 18 to 29.
Mhm.
Those are the tournaments where you can't win at that same belt ever again if you win it. And so some of the big tournaments there are for the adult are the Pan Am championships and the world titles. But when you get from masters level up, that doesn't matter. You can win 10 times if you want.
So they have jujitsu in the Pan Am Games and the Worlds, but they don't have it as an Olympic sport.
Exactly.
That's fucked
They have,
up.
they have a tournament called the Pan Americans and the Worlds here in Long Beach. And so, yeah, they just got done doing the Nogi Worlds in Las Vegas. And so, though that level is, yeah, you can't win at that same belt.
Okay. But as a Masters 5, you can compete again next year as a Masters 5 in the same belt, even though you just got
Yes,
your brown belt.
Master One's beginnings from 30 on, you can compete at that same level. Um, I think it's just because there's just so many competitors on the adult level.
Mhm.
The masters level, I mean, the Vegas one's big. Not the one I competed in, but called the World Masters. You probably get like 20, 25, 30 sometimes people in that bracket because that's the biggest world tournament. And it's one of my bucket lists to win. Hopefully one day. I've not won. Highest I ever got as a white belt was bronze there. But you have some major tough competitors from all over the world that come for that one.
And where's that one hosted?
Las Vegas Convention Center. It's been there for the past I think 5+ years because I've been competed every year, and so I went there since a white belt. So actually, no, it's been there for the past 7 years,
Mhm.
and so it's a huge event. 12,000 competitors, and from teen kids all the way to the adults, and so it's the biggest world tournament for the gi.
And so the one you won was the U.S. version of that,
It was American National.
American Nationals.
Yeah,
Sorry, trying to get all the terminology ready.
yeah.
But so yeah, so you're the American champion. So the next thing to do would be to win the world champion for your age group.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and well, I competed in that one, September of this past year, and so, made it to the 3rd round, and I fought the number 1 guy in the world who ended up winning it, and he won it the year before, and so we went at it, but, I figured out why he's number 1 in the world.
That's tough to go up against number 1 in the 3rd round.
Yeah, well, I was at least ranking in IBJJF, I was number 2.
Oh, really?
I was number 2, not for that tournament, but for the IBJJF ranking, I was ranked number 2 in my division, and, um, I believe going into that, I was number 2 in the open class as well, for my division and my belt.
Oh, so you're one step away from winning it. That's how I see it anyways, but I know there's a lot of work and a lot of other things going on.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was, yeah, so, but yeah, so that was for purple belt. Now I start over, as a brown belt, so I have
Mhm.
to earn my way up.
So when you're fighting all these guys in your purple belt Masters 5 class,
Middleweight.
middleweight. Oh, there's weight classes
Of
too.
course, of course. So I'm up to 181 pounds, and so from light featherweight to all the way up to ultra heavy, which is, I think 2 something, 230, 240, 250 and above. So yeah, there's definitely weight classes. That's what I mean by the open class. And so open class, so you get your division, and then if you place like in the top, um, 3 or 4 of your division, you qualify to compete in the open class. In the open class is same belt, same age bracket, but any weight class.
Okay,
So
now,
I love competing in those.
yeah.
And so that's what I won in Vegas. I won in my division, and then I won the open class division as well.
Oh, okay. Well, that's amazing. Congratulations. That's so jujitsu competition has you have the age of the competitor, the belt of the
Mhm.
competitor, and the weight of the competitor. Those are the categories.
Those are the categories, and then the open class or absolute division if you qualify for that.
Okay.
And I
Finally caught
enjoy
up now after an hour.
and I enjoy those. I enjoy those a lot.
Yeah. Who's the biggest guy you've ever gone up against?
He was actually, he is the current number 1 in the world, for the ultra heavy. His name's Ricky Savage.
Mm.
And so he's about 2, I don't know actually, but he's an ultra heavy, which is 2, just but his size, he's probably like 240 and above.
So you're in the 180 or below, and you're fighting someone who's 240. What is the strategy to take down someone who is 60 pounds heavier than you?
Well, is you think in your mindset, you're not fighting that person, you're fighting the jujitsu,
Mhm.
and so obviously for someone that size, you don't wanna be on the bottom.
No, you're done. You're dead if you're on the bottom.
Not really, um, I ended up on the bottom, but I was able to defend myself, and he actually won by an advantage, so no points and no submissions, and so, but it was a tough fight, and so yeah, I ended up on the bottom, but luckily, I was able to defend it. That's the great thing about jujitsu,
Mm.
is I was able to defend and hold him off, and not get submitted. So, but he was the biggest guy, strong guy too. And I won an open class one time. The guy was about 210 pounds.
Mhm.
I was able to submit him.
That's amazing. I mean, obviously weight doesn't equal skill. You have to still be really skillful. You've got to be quick on your feet. But there's guys that are 220, 230 who are really quick on their feet. Like I've
Yeah,
seen
yeah.
I've seen guys play basketball,
Oh
like
yeah.
football players too.
Oh
Like
yeah.
there's guys that can move at that,
Hmm.
and if they're on you, like that's
Yeah, he was heavy, and he was definitely heavy, and, I had what you call a half guard, so I had one of his legs, hooked on, and so that's why he couldn't advance,
hmm,
and so I just couldn't get out.
holding on for dear life.
I could get out with 240 pounds, like I said, I was happy because I wasn't submitted, and, he wasn't able to advance, but it was a good match.
Have you ever gone up against Mike?
In training.
Yeah.
In training, and he is, oh my god, he's very his game is, a lot of triangle chokes because he's tall, long legs, but no, we've trained together. We've definitely trained together, and, We trained right before his Vegas tournament.
Okay.
We trained together, and so, no, he's great.
For anyone who doesn't remember, I interviewed, Mike Cologne?
Yeah.
Yeah, how do you pronounce his last name?
Cool.
Cologne, yeah, and he is a photographer and, also a jujitsu competitor, so
Belt.
oh,
Yeah.
is he black belt?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I don't remember that, but
Black and that's what and he doesn't compete that often in that Vegas tournament, as you recall, is he rode his motorcycle there.
he rode his motorcycle here, his Ducati. He brought his Ducati to the studio.
Or he rode to Vegas
Yeah, yeah.
for his tournament, just shows up. No one knew he was competing, and he just shows up there. Barely I know, I could validate, he barely was training for that tournament, and he wins the darn thing. He beats, one of the top guys in the world, through a submission. He got him in a triangle choke, I remember that everyone was telling him, like, "Do you know who you're fighting?" And he was like, because he doesn't pay attention to that stuff, and everyone was going up to him like, "Do you know who you're fighting in the finals?" And he was starting to get nervous, and he submitted the guy within 2 minutes, with a triangle, and, it was pretty amazing. And then he rode his motorcycle back home.
Yeah,
It's
I remember that story, yeah.
he's he's a great guy, though. He's, very humble, great at what he does in his work as a photographer, wedding photographer, and he's a great guy on the mat too. He's actually our photographer. Every year we take a group, a whole school picture, and he's the guy that does it.
Yeah. Yeah, he's the real deal on that
Yeah,
front, yeah.
yeah.
So, okay, so in 2024, your wife lets you compete 10 times, which is almost once a month, and you're gearing up for this, American national championship.
Yeah.
You're in your weight class, you're in your belt class, in your Masters 5, and how many and you won. So how many matches did you have to play over how many days? How many competitors did you have to
1.
beat? You only had to fight once?
I only had 5 once.
How is that possible?
That's possible. That's all who signed up for.
There was only 2 people?
And that's what I was gonna say earlier is because I remember Mike said the same thing. Is like, "Hey, I only had 3 people in my bracket or 4 people in my bracket." And so, I think there's other people signed up but didn't show.
Mhm.
So, it was just me and one guy.
Wow.
And then in my open class, there were 4 of us, so I had to win, 2 matches.
Okay.
So that's that yeah, that's why that, for the master's level is you don't really need to qualify because you don't get as many competitors. For me, the average number of people you get are probably about 4 in a typical tournament.
So it's 2 matches.
Yeah, 2 matches.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometime but the big one, the Vegas one is, I had to win 5 matches because there was about 30 people in that bracket, so I had to win, like, 5 matches to win that one, so I got through 2 and then lost the 3rd one.
Right. And oh, that was your right. You lost the 3rd one. That because you were exhausted because they only gave you like 5 minutes rest between.
Yeah, well, for that one, no, not really that one. I had a bigger break for that one, but in the other tournaments, yeah, you gotta be ready to go, 5 minutes, or if you're lucky, more. Um, but yeah, 5 minutes, you gotta be ready to go, and that's why you gotta train hard in training before that.
What's the atmosphere in the arena like? Like, you're in a convention center, probably holds what, like 10,000 people? Like, is it full? Like, or is there, or is it mostly just family members of the people competing? Like, how big is the audience here?
Well, depending on what the tournament is, the American national ones is, pretty crowded. You probably have about maybe 600 competitors or more for that one. But the one I was telling you about, the Master Worlds, that's huge. That's where this year you had 12,000 competitors, and the new Las Vegas, because Convention Center, I think they took up 2 rooms and the bottom floor, and it was huge. It was really huge. They have over 30 mats, and that's huge. Usually the tournaments you go to, they have like 10, 12 mats, but this one, 30 mats.
And everyone's fighting at the same time.
They can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have kids section or teen section, and you have all the adults, and so you have fights going on. Very professionally well done. Referees, scoreboard, scoring people, just really well organized. But that's the big one. That's where people all over the world come. So that's definitely the Wimbledon or the Super Bowl for us, master levels.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Can you imagine like 30 mats and having all those people like competing at the exact same time? And you're like up in the stands trying to find your kid or your husband or your wife or whatever, and you're got the binoculars out or whatever, trying to watch from a distance.
Well, it's not that huge. I mean, they have like bleachers of that one about like maybe 5, 7 levels, and a lot of people can watch ground level. They just have a fence around it. And you know the match times and you know what mat you're on, so you get a lot of family members that are waiting for them there.
Mhm.
And so, but it's intense, you know, especially school pride. Everyone's cheering for them, and everyone's cheering. But it's just a great culture too. And it's competitive, but you see so many people afterwards exchanging social medias and hugging, and because, like I said, they know what it takes to get out there.
And you said on this recent win, your 10-year-old son was with you,
Yeah.
cheering you on, coaching you a little bit.
Both tournaments,
Yeah.
American Nationals, and then the big Master Worlds one, he came with me, and then he came to me, I would say probably about s 6 or more of my tournaments this year,
Mhm.
and he's literally cheering on, and, his voice for some reason is a different wavelength, and you can hear it, and, he understands the game, and, so I re it was a it's been great bonding with him as well.
And obviously now he's training as well.
Yeah, he plans to compete in February.
First competition.
No, he's had a couple,
Okay.
and, he's definitely had a couple, and so this will be, a new one for him.
That's wild. You got your whole family into this.
And my wife will never compete. I mean, if she competes, yeah, that's something that I don't think she'd ever get out there to do, but you never know.
You never know. Time will tell for sure. I mean, we talked earlier about the longevity of people who do
Mhm.
this sport and things like that. Like, do you see yourself being like in your mid-60s just still doing this?
I've told myself, that I would like to still be competing on that level. Um,
How fit do you have to keep yourself to compete? Because you've just won now and you're in your mid-40s. So we had 20 years. Like, can you keep up the training for 20 years to be at a level? Like, that's the thing that I worry about the most, right? Like, because I know how much I would have to train in order to be a decent basketball player, but to keep that up for a decade or more.
well, I plan to, and you gotta remember too, that's why the age division class, and so these people are probably in some arena. Yeah, of course, you're gonna have some outlier people that
Mhm.
train, but it's not like I'll be competing with an 18-year-old, right? And so that's what kind of gives it a little bit of an equal playing ground,
Mhm.
um, um, and with the weight class and the age bracket. So, and I do believe if I, as long as I continue to train and stay healthy, that I think I can compete at that level for quite a while. But I do plan to um, compete all the way up to Master Seven, and we'll see where tennis takes me too.
Yeah, that could be a wild one, right?
Yeah, but, I'm getting hungry to do tennis again, and so that's what 2025 is to start getting myself back into that mindset, and then come a couple years from now, when I get my black belt, that's why I wanna start competing in tennis again.
So, do you think your kids are gonna gravitate towards tennis with you as well?
My son has started to like it, and that's why I started to get into it. He starts to like it a little bit, so I would go and hit some balls at go to, like, a wall and stuff, and so he likes it, and, so he might pick that up with me as well.
Yeah, they will. The moment you go to your first tournament and they're sitting in the stands, they're gonna be like, "I wanna do this too."
Yeah.
Yeah,
But tennis, that's the private lessons. I'm probably gonna have to hit up the private lessons with that, get back into that level of shape.
it's gonna take a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing about tennis that always got to me was just the pounding on the joints because, like, and, you're constantly running, which is obviously a lot requires a lot of stamina and fitness. But when you run, 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 plant, and then swing through, those like that planting, doing that thousands of times in training and stuff
Yeah.
like that, like that's where, there's a lot of pressure on your joints. And you can see guys like Nadal having knee problems and Federer having knee problems because, at that level over that amount of time, the pressure that you put on your joints to move that quickly is unbelievable.
Well, and you gotta remember those guys, how many matches are they playing and how many tournaments? I mean, some of those tournaments, they gotta win 6, 7 matches, to win the championship, and there's multiple tournaments, especially if you're playing the hard courts. Yeah, will clay be a little bit better and grass courts? Probably, but yeah, it is hard depending on the way you play. Nadal was a very, very intensive player. I mean, his whole body, the way he plays. Federer was a lot smoother and stuff, but still, it does use tennis elbow, especially shoulders.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole body. But yeah, the knee and then the shoulder is what you get a lot in those tennis injuries.
Yeah. What kind of training do you think you can do to help make sure that strengthen that up to give you maybe a better chance of having a longer
tennis career.
second tennis career.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think jujitsu has prepared me for that.
Oh, really?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I mean the level because a lot of what jujitsu is isometric strength, rock climbing, right? Isometric strength is grip holding and agility and flexibility and of course cardio. And I do believe that's why I got back wanted to get back into tennis because I do believe my jujitsu training has sort of prepared my body to re-enter tennis again.
Mhm.
Um,
I don't think you're gonna take it very casually. Like, you don't seem like a casual dude. Like, you're gonna go at this hard.
yeah, I probably will. I like to chase those things. I like to chase, just the way my mindset is.
Yeah. When's gonna be your first USTA, amateur tournament?
I don't know. Well, hope maybe 3 years from now is,
No, it's like March. I give you 2 months.
2 months. Who knows? What?
You're on the 2-month rule. It's like, I wanna start in January, first tournament's 2 months.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but, it's been about since I've legitimately played, it's been about 18 plus years,
Okay.
but it comes back to you very quickly.
Yeah.
Actually, that's what I found. Yeah, the strokes are there, and it comes back very quickly. The ball comes a lot faster at first, but the timing is what goes, but the strokes are still there.
It's inspiring to know that you're getting back into tennis in your late 40s, mid 40s,
Yeah,
instead of just playing.
I'm 52, just to let you know.
Are you 52? Fucking, I didn't know that.
Well, you said you almost, were how old are you?
I'm 40. I'm 46 now.
No, I'm 52 years old. So just let for your listeners out there, Master 5 is from 50 to 55 years old.
Matt, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so yes, I'm 52 years old.
That's incredible that you're still fighting at this level at 52. Congrats.
Thank you.
I thought you were in your, I thought Masters 5 was, I didn't know what I thought
Yeah,
actually.
it was
I thought it was, 25. Yeah, okay. I'm with you now.
50 to 55, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of in the middle of my age bracket division.
Mm-hmm.
And so which is an advantage. It does make a difference at that age level.
Mm-hmm.
Someone being 50 versus 55 makes a difference.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know where I was going with that comment. But the USTA has a whole amateur network and different ages and different categories that you can compete on. And I mean, the tournaments are all around the United States because I think like tennis is bigger than jujitsu, right? So, and whether you like the USTA or not, and I've had people on the podcast that hate the USTA, they do have these organized tournaments where you can compete in your age bracket. I mean, how long, like, do you really want to compete in tennis and try to be like a US champion in jiu-jitsu in your age bracket and also in tennis?
I wouldn't mind, but they also depending on the tournament, they have it by ratings as well. There's different ratings, you 3.0, 3.5, or 5.0 rating of your tennis competency level. And then they do it by age, or there's an open class division. And the opens, those are like instructors and coaches and prior collegiate players. So I don't know. I got to get a feel for it. I don't know what tournaments look like now. But I'd like to compete on my age bracket as well. And I don't know if they reassess what my rating is currently. But yeah, I mean, um,
Well, just, I mean, it's going to take you a while, I guess, to get back the timing and the fit and the technical aspect of it. But the fitness aspect of it, you must be in the top 1% of the fitness levels of people in your age bracket who are playing tennis.
yeah, but it's a different type of fitness, like anything. Like
Yeah.
you get a lot of people that they're like, oh man, yeah, I played football, I hit the gym all the time, and they come out in jujitsu and they're exhausted because it's just a different. There's different movements. It's a different type of cardio, and I'm assuming just because I'm fit for jujitsu, I'm sure tennis will be a little bit different. There's different muscles engaged, just different movements. So I'm sure there has to be adjustment, but it does lend itself to being able to adapt quicker, I'm assuming.
Yeah. And you do have that in your wheelhouse. You did have, 4 or 5 years of playing really high level tennis in your muscle memory. So
Yeah.
yeah, like that will come back even though you were in your teens, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah. And I'm pretty, I consider myself pretty aggressive. I'm a serve and volley player. And so I like that. I like to end the points quickly,
So I can take a rest.
just like the opponents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will your wife join you on that venture?
She's been wanting to ask me to teach her some tennis for a while. So I think that's something, again, we could do it together as a family.
Yeah, because I have a friend of mine here in LA actually, and I think he's in his 50s as well, and he's kind of semi-retired. And him and his wife, they do ballroom dancing together, and that's their thing. And what they do is they join all these competitions all around the world
Wow.
for ballroom dancing. and they don't win, but that's the way they see the world. So like it's like, oh honey, let's go to France. There's a ballroom dancing
Yeah.
competition in Paris or Nice or wherever,
Uh-huh.
and then they go there, they do the competition, they see the people, engage with the community, the culture, and they use that as their way of traveling and seeing the world. But you could do that with jujitsu, you could do that with tennis, and your wife is kind of on board for at least the training part, maybe not the competing part. But like it's interesting to like see couples that do things together in later stages in life, and then they use it to kind of see a bit of the world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, and just to let you know too, ballroom dancing is on my bucket list is very I took ballroom dancing, lessons a little bit, growing up. I love dancing, right? And so my thought was like learning a salsa dance, I love dancing, and so I've talked about with my wife is let's do ballroom dancing because it's a great bonding, and
How many hours in a day do you have? I do have an extra like 5 or 6 hours that you're not like letting everyone know. Like your days are 30 hours, everyone else is on 24.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just the same, just, to me, there's that saying, with a sand timer, every grain of sand is a moment in time that you can't get back, and so I'm at that age where you change your perspective a little bit, I'm fortunate and humbled, I have friends who are, can't do these things or their family members are, not here anymore, and so there's just a deeper appreciation for life for me, and so I wanna take advantage as much as possible.
Mhm. And imagine like your daughter is in high school and she's getting back into jujitsu. Your kid is 10. He's getting into jujitsu. But by the time they're both in university, like, you could have your tennis game at a pretty high level by then.
I'm
And
hoping, I'm hoping.
and then you could be on the road, like
Yeah,
competing, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so that'd be a great retirement and ballroom dancing thrown in there, at the same time. Ballroom dancing, you get fit too, I mean, that's a sport that engages in every muscle of the body.
Yeah. I have 0 rhythm. I'm like tone deaf and rhythm deaf. I've suffered from that for a long time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But that's wild. So how much training now do you have to do to get this like black belt? Like so you said like 2 or 3 years, but what does that really entail? Like are you still training like 4 days a week for the next 2 to 3 years? And then who tells you you're ready for your black belt?
Well, your head professor, the school has a head professor, but
Seems slightly subjective, right?
it depends on the school, but
Yeah.
it depends on the school, but, they look at your development as well, and of course, the frequency to which you train. And so, yeah, it's subjective, but at our school, it's a conglomerate of people, other professors and black belts, where they see who's ready to venture there into that next belt level. And so, typically speaking, the assumption is the more time you put on there, the more ready you're going to be, especially when the school has a built-in curriculum.
Mhm.
And so that's usually that correlation. Yeah, so it's subjective and, when they believe I'm ready for it, I'll be ready to accept it when that time comes.
Do you have to like beat another black belt to get your black belt?
No, no, there's no test, so to speak. Some schools, they do it differently, yeah, so it all depends.
It's interesting, like, 'cause I, again, with David, who is here, who is a taekwondo, expert or champion or, coach, he was saying, like, where you train and who you train under is super important,
Yeah.
and he was saying, like, this can become, like, really cliquey, like, because it's not necessarily, like, which belt you have, but it's, like, which belt you have and who you trained with. Because if you're a certain belt and you didn't go to, like, the right school, there's that belt is, like, a little diminished or something like that. Is that a jujitsu thing too? It's like
I think that's anywhere, just like in basketball, collegiate sports, and anything who you trained under the lineage. To me, man, what's most important is if the place is a good fit for you
mhm,
in the culture, right? Um, in the culture that people are supportive, they're supportive of your development, they create a safe environment. That's what's important to me. And so for anyone out there who is thinking about training in jujitsu or any type of martial art, make sure it's a good fit for you. And it doesn't have to be the biggest names and so forth. And so there's some great small jujitsu schools out there that don't maybe have the big names or the lineage there, but the people's experience is amazing. And there's some people with great big schools with great lineage and probably don't have the best experience. So it really is up to you to choose what is a good fit for me and what's going to fulfill my needs.
That's a really hard choice to make
It can be, yeah.
because that can color your experience, right? Like whether
Mhm.
you're having a positive experience or whether you're not, like you could just be at the wrong school or have the wrong professor or whatever. Like it's
Yeah, it depends, and there's some schools out there that are highly focused on competition, and then there's schools out there that are focused on the experiences for everybody, and so, like I said, it all depends, and some people, the competition is what's important for them, and for some people, that overall experience and is what's important to them, so
so how did you pick your like your training center or your school? Like how did you find that? Or is it just you just picked the one that was closest to you?
well, they have a great lineage, and it is the one closest to me.
Which is the most important thing in Southern California.
Yeah, and then my daughter was there, and so it just like I said, just naturally progressed, but luckily, I'm in a school that, has a good lineage and a great culture, so and great curriculum, so it worked out, um, um, perfectly, so to speak,
Mhm.
on that level.
Oh, well, that's good. Because, like, yeah, if if you go to the training center that's the closest to you, it might be also the worst, right?
Yeah,
You just don't know. Because making those decisions is really hard. It's like joining a gym, right? Who's going to have the trainer that connects with you the best, that where you can get the
exactly.
most out of it, right?
Yeah, and luckily, our head professor is always smiling, always welcoming. He always makes sure to say hello to the parents that are there, and that's the kind of culture. And because you got a lot of professionals too. You got to remember, there's a lot of people who join jujitsu at an older age. These are professionals. These are professional people who go to work and they want to come to a place where they are respected and valued. And luckily, he is the reason why he's heading up that school. He's always smiling, great curriculum, great lineage, and he creates a culture, that's competitive, but also very, very inviting and safe.
Mm. Okay, so let's say this. Let's say in the next 2 years, you get a black belt, then you win the US championship, which you've already done, then you win the world championship, which is a goal of yours.
Yes.
Would you retire or are you just going to keep going?
No, I don't, I don't foresee myself retiring as long as I'm healthy and I can still do it. I plan to compete as long as I can.
So there's no like desire to go out on top, when you win the world, you have your black belt,
The,
like this
the,
is as good as it's getting.
no,
No.
because it's like I said, it's the process and the experience. And I'm not doing it. This is not based on my living. I'm not earning money because of it. And it's just, I need something to strive for, and just like anything that you're passionate about, it's, sometimes, oh, let me just make that one movie or, that one, that's why you get a lot of people, you wonder why these people who have so much money and why they don't, well, oh God, you have enough money. Stop. No, it's the passion. It's the process that they fell in love with. And so that's kind of where I'm at with that. And I also want, it keeps me healthy. And I think that's a good role modeling for my kids of the due diligence and hard work
Yeah.
and to stay committed to something. So it's a multitude of things. It's not just for me. I believe there's a lot of things I'm doing for myself and role modeling, and it's have conversations like this.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can have, I'd have you on all the time, no matter what, whether you're winning or not. So don't worry.
And the integration of mental health and jujitsu has been huge for the awareness I'm putting out there. In any podcast I've done, it's come up in some form or fashion. And there's such a lot of relationship with that in mental health. There really is. And so that's another big reason why martial arts and jujitsu is huge of what it does on a mental health level.
Right. And we talked about that a little bit in our first podcast conversation
Yeah.
because you deal with a lot of people who have stress, anxiety, substance abuse, all this kind of stuff. And you're right, like being disciplined in a martial art, and going down that path can help maybe balance out the rest of your life.
Yeah, it does. It gives you something to look forward to and be passionate about. And we all need that no matter what it is. You gotta find a passion, something that wakes you up and gives you purpose.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Is there any like crazy stories that you've had in jujitsu that you might want to talk about or share? Like anything that's happened to you that's just been out of this world or ridiculous or something that you had difficulty putting into words?
Well, the first thing my very first tournament that I told you about, my second match, I literally watched the night before on YouTube a takedown move. I've never practiced it. I was literally, because when you're a white belt, you have all these type of things that's going on in your mind. You watch all these YouTube. And so this was the night before the tournament that was watching a YouTube channel on takedowns because I didn't know what to expect. And so I've never done it, and it was a judo move where it's a throwdown. You underhook the arm and throw them all over your shoulder. My second match, the guy was being very loose with his grip, and I just went for it. I literally closed my eyes and just went for it, and next thing I know, you hear all these people going, "Ooh," and next thing the guy's on his back, and I just went for it, and so, um, that's probably one of the most craziest things that ever happened, and
You won on a move that you'd never practiced
I've
before.
never practiced. I literally watched it on a YouTube video the night before. Afterwards, I'll show it to you. I have it on my phone,
I can watch YouTube videos as well, and I can promise you that would not happen.
and I just went for it.
Yeah.
I just went for it, and as a white belt, I think the guy was shocked, and the match didn't end there. We kept going 'cause I didn't know how to finish it.
Yeah.
That's, usually you'll get him in an arm bar from there, but, so that's one of the most craziest things, that's ever happened, and I think that just your trust in yourself is the lesson that I learned from that.
That's crazy though that you can have the training or the self-awareness physically and mentally to just watch something on a video and be like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna use that in the tournament," without practicing it for weeks or something like that.
Without even doing it ever,
Yeah.
and it was just everything was perfect. His arm was there, and he was kind of tired, and I just
That's wild.
Yeah.
Have you ever been hurt by any chance in doing this?
Um, hurt, I would say early on, I got, one thing you learn really quickly is not to let the ego and to tap out, and so one time I was caught in an armbar in training, and, I tried to fight it, and the guy, to submit me, really secured it well, and so my elbow was hurting for a little bit, but nothing significant, knock on wood.
Yeah.
No knee injuries. It's just like I said, my ears is a testament of the extent of my injury.
You gotta do what we did in rugby. I played rugby for years, and all the forwards always had their ears all fluffy, and they would always tape them.
Taped in,
Yeah.
but magnets now are what people use, but, I think they're at the point where I don't think they're gonna get affected anymore. They're beyond they're beyond that.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, because you can tap out in jujitsu, then the whole thing about getting hurt is really just your stubbornness to tap out.
Yeah. So right now, if someone even before they finish the move, I just tap, right?
Mhm.
If they didn't even have to finish it, and, it takes the glory out of that person's, move, but I just tap. I just say tap because I know they're gonna finish it.
Mhm.
Or if they have my ankle, right? And I'm not gonna wait for them to yank on it
Mhm.
before I tap.
So the experience helps a little.
The experience helps. Yeah, the experience helps a little bit when you sometimes when you have an ego, but that's what I'm saying. Those younger people where that's a living, they spend their money to come from another country to compete. You see a lot of injuries at those tournaments. And one time I brought my friend and his brother. They were wanting to do jujitsu and stuff, and I decided to bring him to a world tournament. And there were injuries after injuries, is because these people, they're doing it, they're hardcore, and they're doing it for a living. They spend a lot of money for it. They're not going to tap. But as you get older, you don't see that as much.
Are you worried about your son maybe moving forward and loving jujitsu to the point where he might wanna compete at those levels at that age group? Because, like, if he's just starting at 10 and you've been in this for 8 years, by the time he's 16, 18, 20, he could be competing against some of those
It could
people as
be,
well, yeah.
could be, and I'll support him as much as possible. And but if that's something he wants to do, that's up to him as well.
Right.
But he definitely has a passion for it, and he's the one that wants to compete. And I want to support him. I can't say you can't compete when I'm here competing.
Yeah, you got the whole fucking family in now, right?
I can't say you can't compete. It's not good for you. And here I am putting myself out there.
Yeah. That's wild. I love this, man. Like, you're like a multidisciplinary athlete, just crushing it at every level in your early 50s.
So if I ever come back here again, if come years later, I'll maybe in salsa, I'll maybe be talking about my salsa tournaments.
I don't know if this is the podcast for salsa dancers, but definitely the tennis. I would love to hear about how this tennis thing goes because I just know nothing. I know quite a bit about. I played tennis too for a long time, so I could actually like compete. Actually, you know what? If you can win something in salsa, you got to come back because I'd pick your brain on that for hours.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Master 7 salsa dancing.
Master salsa dancer. I mean, does your wife like dancing?
She does, and she would like to do salsa. Salsa is just one of those that in a West Coast swing or buggy dancing. Those to me, those are so attractive and so fun. I used to go to those clubs and watch them dance,
Mhm.
and it's just so fascinating to me.
Yeah, but you only have 7 days a week. Like, how are you gonna mix in the jujitsu with the dancing with the tennis?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I have to do it.
And which one do you do after which one so that you
Boy,
recover enough to not hurt yourself to do the next one?
that's the next quagmire I have to figure out.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's anything else on the horizon that I want to passionately pursue. Writing the book was I got that out of the way, but those are the 3 things that are floating around. I don't think there's anything else on a physical level. No golf, and nothing against golf, but has not been on my radar. A lot of my friends play golf, and that's just not so. I don't think I'm patient enough. I'd rather choke people than wait around.
Well, choking people's 5 minutes, right? Like, who wants to hate themselves for 3 hours or 4 hours?
Yeah, it's just for me, it's there's a lot of skill involved. It's a great sport. It's just not the pace that I like.
Yeah. You need to up the tempo a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, this is great. Is there anything that we haven't talked about or anywhere you wanna go? Anything you wanna mention before we tap out?
Tap out, good one. No, 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 that's it. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this, and, I'm very passionate about, these things, mental health and jujitsu and everything else. I'm just passionate about tapping into people to chase their passions.
That's the best, isn't
Life
it?
is too short.
Yeah.
Life is too short to not get what you can best out of it.
Well, I love, for the audience as well, like, I love having people come back on the podcast like a second time or even a third time or whatever, because that first time I'm really like, and the audience as well, like, we're getting to know you, right?
Yeah,
Where are you from? What were your parents like?
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
where'd you go to school? Like, all these kind of things. And we get to learn. And then you're dealing with people with mental health issues, you substance abuse and anxiety and all this stuff. And then I think like somewhere around with like 10 minutes left in our last podcast, you go, by the way, I'm a jujitsu champion. I'm like, what the fuck is that? So now that you won this tournament and that, you're still competing and stuff like that, it's great to have you come back and talk about like
Oh, yeah.
this one passion and leave your entire career, in the last conversation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was glad we gave more time to it. I
absolutely.
did bring up ballroom dancing at the very end, though.
Of the last chat
No, this one.
of this, so this is the preface for the next conversation.
It's like a sequel. He's gone.
Yeah, yeah. They bring out like one wrinkle in the last scene of that, and
Exactly.
that carries on to the next our next conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you so much for swinging by again. I know it's a bit of a drive to come into the studio, but I'm glad we made it happen. And honestly, like, I think what you're doing at this level, at any age, but at our age, your age, is totally inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and yeah, just keep doing it and keep staying healthy. And best of luck keeping the whole family in it and getting whatever you need to get out of that experience of having the whole family in geese on the mat all
Oh,
battling it out together.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I thank you so much, and look forward to potentially seeing you again.
Absolutely, come by anytime, man. These are great chats. I love it.
Thank you.
And we'll just go here so people can see we're in the same room. And I got to remember that's Oklahoma University, not Ohio University.
Ohio.
I'm so fucking new to this country. I'm still trying to get
That's
a
okay.
handle. Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
Okay, are they in a bowl game or something? Or
No, they did really bad this year.
okay, but next year.
But Ohio State's still in it.
Okay, but Oklahoma for next year.
Yeah.
Okay, great to see you again.
Great to you.
Cheers.